And hello again, and welcome to the next video about my Mark II project. And today we're at the garage, we're on the drive because it's a beautiful day here, the hottest day of the year so far. Just a pity it's a bit windy, but hopefully this microphone will do its job and it won't be a problem. So in the last video I mentioned that I've been spending a lot of money and I bought some parts from a friend, Paul T, and today they arrived in the box. I've also bought a lot of parts from Z Power, and they're in the box below. Now most of the parts from Z Power are for the Z1000 A1 project, the frame of which is behind me here. But there will be a few things for the Mark II, such as seat hinges, that sort of thing, small things. So we'll ignore that for the time being, because that will be opened up on a video about the Z1000 A1. And in here now, from Paul, I've got, it's strange actually, because he's bought all the things that I wanted. So I think we must, have the same ideas about performance parts for Kawasaki's and whatnot. So what we've got here is, got some dyno leads, already got them on 1170, so they'll come in handy. I've got, where are we? In here, oh, I recognise that. Yeah, charging system. What's that? Is that a charging system or is that the, yeah, charging system from Electrex. Guess what? I've already got one of them in the Mark II engine already, but that'll come in very handy for the Z1000 A1, so that's great. What I've also got is air filters. These are from America, APE. I like them, that's fine. Need some air filters. Let's just put them out of the way. Put that out of the way. Then in here I've got boxes and boxes here. I've got, Motion Pro throttle kit. Guess what? I've got the same kit on my 1170, so great news there. We've also got in here, a rectifier. Yeah, I recognise that. RR14, again from Electrex. Already got one for the Mark II, but that'll come in very handy for this bike behind me, so that's great. Another useful purchase. And then down here, what have we got here? Ooh, DC1-1 set of coils. Exactly the same set of coils as I've got on my 1170. Great stuff, so that's fine. Again, we do seem to buy the exact same things. Where's in here? What's this one? Oh, DS2. Oh, dyno kit. Yeah, I need that. Already got one on the Mark II. Haven't got one yet. Haven't got much at all actually for the Z1000 A1 behind me, so that'll come in very handy for that. And finally, the big box, quite heavy box actually, is here. In here, a set of Mikuni RS34 carbs. Guess what? I've got the exact same carbs to my 1170, so obviously we do, have the same opinions about performance parts. So that's what I need for the Mark II. I have already got, as part of the purchase of the whole bike when I bought it, I've got some nice RS36s. But Roger Upperton, who's doing the head for me, said no, that's far too big for a road bike, and he'll only take out the ports to 34mm. That's kind of the limit. So that head is being rebuilt, all new valves, seals, everything, springs. It's been ported to match 34mm carbs, which is what these are. So again, a good buy for me, and hopefully I'll do it justice, and Paul can watch these videos and say, yeah, he's doing well with them. They're not being wasted. So that's great news. So yeah, happy with that. It's actually very hot today, so I've got my my water here. Today I think it's 30 degrees, which is, I think, very hot for this time of year in northern England anyway. So let's get out of the sun, even though I'm in the shade here, and we'll go and have a look at what I've been working on the Mark II this week. And so now here back in the garage, my current priority is to fit a side stand to this bike, because without one it's very precarious when I'm trying to put the bike on its padded stand or with a lift beneath it. I'm on my own in a cramped space, and one wrong move, the bike's going to topple over, maybe even topple into another bike behind it, and that's just a disaster. So right now I'm working on fitting a side stand to this bike. And sadly, it's not so simple. And so to that end, I've got two side stands to choose from, both different lengths. Now they're both from Kawasaki's, not quite sure where that's from, but this one, this longer one, is from a Kawasaki Z1000 750. And the good news is, even though there's probably 20 years difference between my Mark II and the bike this came off, the mounts are just the same. So thank you, Mr. Kawasaki, for that. Well, the problem is, the gap here, where it slots onto a bracket on the frame, that's 10 millimeters, but the bracket on the frame of my Mark II isn't 10 millimeters, it's closer to 12 millimeters. That could be because of the thickness of the powder coat. What I don't want to do is attack my beautiful powder coating and just destroy it and file it all off just so these can fit. So what I've been doing is slowly, painfully filing the inside of these two kickstands to widen them, and that's quite difficult. It's quite a slow process because it turns out, although this is really made out of mild steel, it's blooming hard wearing and very difficult to file. And I think that's because these side stands or kickstands, I think they were forged, so were stamped out on some giant machine in Kobe, Japan many years ago, and it makes them very hard wearing, very tough, but equally difficult to file. So I've just been spending far too long filing it down, but I'm almost there now, I'm almost there. And once I've done that, get it on the bike and I'll be a lot happier. I mean, it still needs to be painted, look a bit rusty, a bit scabby, but I can paint them later on. Right now I just want to get the security of having a side stand on the bike. So when I've done that, we'll come back and we'll work on something else. Okay, here goes. Almost, but not quite there yet. Right, another 10 minutes of filing and I think it might fit. So come back when I've done that. Whew. Well, I'm getting really bored of this, but I think we're almost there. A little bit more work, and hopefully this side stand will fit on the bike. And so at last, I've got this side stand from a Kawasaki ZX-R 750 fitted to my old Mark II, and thank God for that, because that was quite a long process to slowly file down this side stand to fit, but it's all done now. I've not yet fitted the actual spring because A, it's very difficult to do and quite awkward, and B, I'm going to have to remove this side stand soon just to paint it, so there's no point fitting a spring at the same time. So thank God for that. So now let's move on to something else. And so with that side stand on the bike at last, I can now turn my attention to the foot pegs and the foot controls in general. Now on the 1170 I've got rear sets, and they really are rear. They're a long way back, quite a long way up, and I wouldn't say they're the most comfortable footrests I've got on a bike, so I don't want to go quite as far with the Mark II, but I still do want to fit some pretty cool looking foot pegs and foot controls. So to make a start, I've been having a look to see how the standard foot pegs are held in place on the frame, and it's a little bit odd, it's a little bit unusual. I think it's the same on all the old Zs. So I drew up a little diagram here to explain how it works. Hopefully you can see that. So what we've got here is the frame, and we've got two holes in the frame where we mount the footrest to. But they're not just simple holes, oh no. What we've got is a hole here, which is 12 millimeters, and that shrinks down to 10 millimeters on the inside of the frame. It's got a little shoulder there. Into that goes this special fastener, and it is actually a bit odd because it's got a smooth 12 millimeter center. It's then got on the inside, it's got a M10, I think it's M10 fine, I'm not sure, but an M10 10 millimeter thread which goes onto this area here, because that's also threaded. Then on the outside, the bit you can see, it's got an M8 or 8 millimeter thread which sticks out, and onto that you put a nut which holds the footrest in place, and there are two of those, of course. So it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. That looks a bit dubious. Why it's so complicated, I don't know. So I had to think about it, and what I want to do is bolt on a kind of aluminium hanger, a sort of aluminium plate onto which we can then bolt on the various controls, the brake, the pegs, and so on, gear change lever and so on. So turn around a little bit, and my solution is we'll just use some M10 cap heads straight in the frame, but that means that the outer part of the frame here, where it's wider, that would mean the cap head bolt is not supported. So instead we'll make a sleeve, a 1mm thick sleeve, which will go around this area of the bolt, and that will give it support so that it's not loose in this part of the frame. So obviously I've got to make 4 of those, or rather Jeff's got to make 4 of those, and then all I've got to do then is make some kind of plate here which fits on the side of the frame, and from that plate, well, if not 2 plates, one either side, we can then bolt on the foot pegs, controls, and so on. Well, that was the plan anyway. So next up, there goes the microphone, never mind. So anyway, yes, what I did was I just made this little bit of very crude bit of cardboard template. Then I found some offcut of aluminium plate, cut it out, drilled it, and fitted it on the bike just to see how things look. So that's when it seems I found a potential problem. And so here we have this rather crude alloy template I've just fitted to the bike. It is just a template, that won't be the final version, as it were. So what I'm trying to do is work out where I want to have the foot pegs, and what I found is that, particularly on the 1170, you have to be very careful that this kickstand, side stand, when it's in upright position, doesn't interfere with the movement of your foot and the lever and the gear change and so on. And that's a problem I'm finding here, because if I wanted to have the foot pegs in a rather comfortable position, around about here, just a little bit back and up from the standard position, maybe there where my finger is, then you've got a problem, because it's almost touching the side stand, and therefore it's going to interfere, the side stand will interfere with the movement of the gear change lever, the linkage rod, and indeed your foot. So that's no good, that's no good. And I've had the same problem with the 1170, which is behind here, and we got around that problem by having the rear sets really far back and really high. So on the 1170, the foot peg position is pretty much here, it's about there. It's almost actually where the pillion footrest would be normally. And I can live with that, but it is at the extreme end of where I would be comfortable having my feet on a motorbike, particularly as a road bike. So I don't want to repeat that process on the Mark II. I want this to be a comfortable, sort of everyday, if you like, road bike. So to get around that problem, what do we do? I suppose I could give up the idea of having rear sets and just be sensible for once and use the standard setup. I mean, this is from a 650, so it's not quite the same, but overall it would put the peg there, you know, no problem at all, and then the gear change is here. No problem at all. But of course, I don't like standard setups. So the other option is to give up the idea of making your own rear sets and instead go and buy a pair from Japan, because there are some really cool rear sets in Japan made for my bike by the likes of PMC, and I found one I really like. But of course, it's not cheap. In Japan, the price is the equivalent of £350, which is okay. I mean, making your own rear sets isn't cheap. You've got to get the alloy plate, you've got to pay for the labour from Jeff to make the levers and so on. You've got to pay for the linkage rods, the rose joints, you've got to polish the parts, and then probably get them anodised, and that's not cheap. So $350 against making your own, which I think would cost me about 200 plus anyway. And of course, by the time you've paid import duty and VAT, that $350 could be $450. But you know, something I really like these rear sets have found, and it would save me a huge amount of time, a huge amount of effort and hassle just to buy something for a change, get it on the bike, stand back and go, yes, I like that, yeah, everything works, I've got all the linkage rods already, no stress, everything's okay, I don't have to worry about the interference. So anyway, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my credit card out, talk to Z Power because they do bring in some parts from Japan. Get it ordered. I'm not sure how long it'll take. Obviously with supply chain issues, who knows if it's in stock or not. But yeah, I think that's what I'll do, and it will save me a huge amount of time and effort. Now, one problem people find when they fit a wider, more modern swing arm to suit a wider, more modern tyre and wheel is that the rear shocks are no longer aligned. This lower shock mount is further out, and that means on a bike like mine, the shocks are no longer vertical straight down, they're at an angle, and that's no good at all, because the sideways load on that shock will soon destroy it. It would ruin the seal, I would imagine. Not good at all. So to get around that problem, somehow we have to move out the upper shock mount. Now, we got around that problem with the 1170 over here, or rather Jeff did before I bought the project. He cut the frame in half and widened this upper part of the frame. That's a bit radical, I'm not doing that with this bike. So instead, what Les did before I bought the project was he made these two parts here which move out this top mount by the appropriate amount. So they're now fitted to the other side of the bike. So if we go around, I'll show you how it works. And here is that modification fitted to the bike. So all it is, we unscrew this outer part, so, and then we've got this stainless steel space here, which screws onto the original threaded mount. Yeah, so that's how it works. And the reason I'm showing you that is because I got an email this morning from Nathan. He's a production supervisor at Maxton Suspension. He's the guy I've been talking to, and he said to me, you know, can you just confirm the size, width and diameter of the upper shock mount, because I don't have it. I said okay, fine. So I came out here and measured it, and what's important is that this upper shock mount now is 18mm. Now, I don't know what that's from, or whether a ZRX 1200 also had 18mm, but it's certainly not the same as on a standard bike. So that's important, because that way we get the shocks to fit first time. And that's quite interesting, because if I had bought Ohlins or something like that, or YSS, I don't think I'd be talking to the production supervisor of the company to confirm the details of my shocks. So that's one of the good things about using a local company, a smaller company, who can make you just what you want. So yeah, right now my shocks are in production, being made, and hopefully I'll be able to go over to Maxton in a few days' time and collect them. Oh, and by the way, a quick update on the Rearset situation. I was saying I'm going to buy a pair from Japan, but I haven't. I've bought a pair of Rearsets from Italy, made by Tarozzi. And I like Tarozzi Rearsets. I've got them on my gussie behind me here. And the reason why I hadn't looked at Tarozzi before now is because I assumed, incorrectly, that the Tarozzi Rearsets included an extension to the plate back here for the pillion pegs, because that's the way they are on my gussie. But as it turns out, for the Mark II, they don't. They're just simply rear sets for the rider's feet. So I really like them. I like the style of them. I think it suits the bike really well. So I've ordered some. They take allegedly a 30-day lead time to come from Italy. Not sure that's true or not, but I bought them and they're on the way. And the price was originally quite good. It was like £220, but that was before the VAT, before the import duty, before the cost, before the postage, and altogether it's about 310 by the time it comes to me. And now I'm just back from Camcoat, where I've collected some parts for my various projects that I've had hard anodized and ceramically anodized, and some parts of course are for the Mark II. And the first one of those is these engine brackets which Jeff made for me out of billet alloy some time ago, and I didn't want to get them polished, so these have been ceramically anodized, which is a very hard wearing finish, very tough, and hopefully they'll look good for many years to come. So that's that. And the other thing I've had done for the Mark II is I've had these plates, I've got two of these, also ceramically anodized, and what these are plates which cover up a kind of hole in the top of the cam cover. So let me get the cam cover out and I'll show you why. And so here we have the cam cover for the bike. And as you can see, it's got these two areas which remain uncovered, unpowder coated. And that's because this is where the anti-pollution gizmo was built into the cam cover when it was made. Don't like it, look ugly, don't need it. So I had Jeff completely machine off anything associated with these two weird gizmos. And therefore you need to cover this area up, because the anti-air pollution device works because there is a hole, in fact two holes on either side, which goes from the outside world into the engine above the cams. So therefore you need to make something like that to cover up the now exposed holes and make it look a bit more presentable. So all's well, all's well. The only problem is that when I took this cam cover to have it powder coated at Triple S in Bingley, I also took a lot more things at the same time. I took some engine parts and wheels and whatever, and we had a bit of a miscommunication between me and Matthew on the day, because I didn't make it clear that I wanted him to powder coat this whole area. He knows that you don't powder coat over gasket surfaces, so therefore he's carefully taped off all this area before the piece was powder coated. And he thought, well, hang on a minute, this must also need to be a gasket service, so I'll leave it as is, I'll carefully tape it off and all's well. But when I got to pick it up, I thought, oh no, I forgot to tell him I want all this powder coated too. And of course the problem is my fault, I didn't make it clear what I wanted, so I didn't want to say to him, look, just do it all again because you got it wrong, because I got it wrong. So the problem now is that if I take my little this little cover here, it doesn't quite cover up all the exposed aluminium that we now have. It's blooming close, it's close, but at the top here you can see a little bit of bare aluminium, which we don't want. So I'm going to have to find a way of covering that problem up. So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'll just tape it all off, and I'll just spray all this with gloss paint, which is a very good finish compared to the gloss powder coat. I don't think you'll even notice it. Plus, of course, this sits underneath the tank, not something you could ever notice particularly. But yeah, there's a lesson learned. Okay, so what's next? Well, first of all, I've got to tidy up because I'm surrounded by boxes of stuff, mainly for the new project, the Z1000 A1. But I have had a box turn up today for the Mark II. And here it is. And in here is an original Kawasaki front headlamp that I want to fit to the bike. Steel back, not a cheap plastic one, so pretty happy with that. However, fitting this round headlamp to the bike isn't so simple, and that's because the yokes off this bike and the forks are from a Kawasaki Z1000 and as such it would have had a square headlamp and quite a large cockpit fairing, which I'm not going to fit. And to fit all that on the bike, Kawasaki used this rather ugly bracket, which fits something like that on the bike. So to mount this to the bike, to the yokes rather, it's got two threaded holes on the lower yoke and two cast mounts here on the top of the yoke, which face down. So one option is to try and replicate this, but make it look a lot neater, a lot prettier, and mount my round headlamp to a new version of this. So to that end, I've borrowed another similar bracket, but simpler bracket, which is here. It's painted bright red for some reason. And I think this is a modified bracket from a Kawasaki Z650, because it looks quite similar to the one I've got on my bike. So that would fit something like that. Obviously it would need to be modified to fit, and I can't actually change this when it's not mine, but I could maybe try and replicate this shape so it fits the bike. But that's a lot of work, and right now I'm not even sure whether I'll like the way it would look, because I'm not sure how much of this you could see from the side. It might look very odd, don't know. So one option instead is to be a bit more sensible and go for a rather standard solution, which is to bolt the headlamp to brackets which in turn clamp around the yokes, a little bit like we've done on the 1170. They're one-off clamps that Jeff made for me, and if we use the same idea on this bike, they won't be the same. I'll change them and we'll do something slightly different. Right now I'm not sure which way to go, but you know, we've got plenty of time to work out which one I prefer. Meanwhile, at the back of the bike, it's much simpler. It's all standard, so all I've had to do is bolt on the standard rear lamp. The only problem I've had is that when I bought the bike, I also went out and bought a brand new rear lamp. Can I find it anywhere? No. I've put it somewhere safe. I've looked everywhere for it in the house and I cannot find it. No doubt it'll turn up eventually, but you know, right now I've just had to use the original old 40-odd-year-old rear lamp. I have made amends because I've used brand new stainless steel screws to hold it in place. And so next I need to do something about this bare aluminium which is around these cover plates that we fitted to the top of the cam cover. And to do that, I had an idea. So I've dug out my little, very small brushes, and believe me, they are very small, some tiny ones there. I use these to paint the white on the Z650 badges on the side panel, so yeah, they are very small. And the paint I'll use will be this. It's Lost Black engine enamel. Now what I could do, I guess, is spray the whole damn cam cover and it'll probably look okay. But the problem there is that this might not be quite as hard wearing and quite as chip resistant as powder coat, so I don't want to sort of spray it and then find a year from now it's starting to look terrible because this top layers start to flake off. So I'm going to just use this in a very small amount around the area where we've got some exposed aluminium. And to do that, what I'm going to do is pick it all up. I'll spray it into here. I'll get my little brush and I'll very carefully go around it as best I can and cover up all that bare aluminium. So come back when I finish. Whew. Well, I must say this painting is taking a lot longer than I expected, and that's because when I'm using this rattle can paint here, spray it into the cup, dip my brush in, away we go. At first the paint's too thin and watery to use really well, so okay, I'll wait a minute or two, let it thicken up because obviously it's drying out in here. You wait, try again, yes, that's better, off we go. But then within a minute or so it becomes too thick and too dry. It's drying out too quick to use it with a brush, so it's been a bit frustrating trying to get the right consistency. Anyway, I've now given it, I think, 2 coats of paint, and hopefully you can tell, you can no longer see the bare aluminium. I'll now let that dry for an hour or so, and then we'll come back and apply even more coats of paint. No point showing that because you know the procedure. So now I think we're coming to the end of the video because I'm running out of things to do today. I was hopeful that by the end of this video I would have had the Maxton shocks arrive and I can get them on the bike and we can check out how fantastic they look, but they're not here yet, so we'll have to wait. So anyway, that's it for now, so thanks for watching and cheers.